So Charlie, what makes Greenwich homes sell quickly?
It's a big question because it assumes that all homes are the same. And I think when you have such a range of prices where our bottom of the market is, roughly call it around $1 million, and our top of the market is like 143 million.
Is there a ceiling?
Yeah, probably not. So it's hard to address because you're addressing such a wide range. But I think we could dial it back from a big picture level. Understanding that we're not really dealing with nuances in the market. What makes a home sell quickly here is pricing. Clearly has to be priced competitively, and that's your attraction factor. That's probably what gets your eyeballs. The house relative to what it's offering is a good value. I would say it probably is in this town. It probably is of a lower end of the price point. In other words, like we talked about that range going to 143 million. Well, realistically, we're probably talking about homes under 5 are moving at a brisk pace right now.
That would, like, once you're at 5+, you're at the higher end of the market in Greenwich.
Yeah. I would say you're at the higher end, and you're where, at least in current times, or anything could change. 5 to 10 to $20 million houses are actually from a historical perspective, selling very quickly right now. But realistically, from boots on the ground, it's not like a $2 million house that probably sells in the first weekend if it's priced and prepared properly. Maybe you have a few more weeks, or you have a little bit more time on the appropriately priced $5 million properties.
And there's less people that could afford them, essentially.
Less total buyers. I think the buyers themselves tend to be a little bit different. I guess if we fired that market up to the point where it was, flying, they would have no choice.
Yeah.
But with the market moving a little slower, that buyer is able to dial into that. They see the house. Basically, they can see the house didn't sell in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
That they loved. It's still around. And so they can already just sort of sense that the market's moving a little bit slower.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So if we're focusing on, what makes a home sell faster, it's definitely price point. And it's definitely it's where the home is. That clearly has a factor, but price should compensate for that. That would be pricing appropriately from my perspective.
Of course.
And then the other big thing is how turnkey the home is. We live in an area where you're not buying a $2 or $3 million house because you have in most cases anyway, maybe some of our buyers, but most of these people are busy with real big demands on their daily schedule, and it's way more important. And if you even broke it down into like an hour, dollar per hour that particular person makes, why would they want to spend it fixing up their house?
Yeah.
Even from a pure logical perspective, but from a functional perspective, they just can't leave their business to focus, any energies and efforts on fixing this house up.
Yeah.
So from them, that turnkey house has value beyond likely what it cost you to be turnkey.
Yeah. Happily pay a premium so they can just move in and not need to gut the place.
Exactly.
That's an extreme example, but
exactly. Yeah. And while, if you have an older renovation where you've put lots of money in this house, if you've made it really great and you've made it appealing to the masses, which is a key, right? You have to do the right things to the house to make it appealing to the market.
Yeah.
But let's assume you did that, then that buyer's, you're going to get a lot of that value back. I won't want to say 100% because you probably did. All the studies that we've ever seen, don't necessarily suggest that major remodeling returns 100% on value.
Yeah.
But you can get a lot of your money back from that particular buyer, assuming that's not a real old renovation. They walk in and it's appealing to them. So that's I think a real bonus for our local sellers here, that you can actually do work to these homes and get it back because we have the buyers coming in that cherish that. It's $100,000 to do that kitchen over, or $200,000 to do that kitchen over. They would far rather just walk in and have it be done than go through the whole process of making it at least overwhelming. The majority of buyers would rather just have that done.
Yeah. And in terms of presentability, I noticed you said the key term that kind of perked my ears up was you said appeal to the masses. Mm-hmm. Would you say each town kind of has a preference? Yeah. And does this go as far as like even just build styles? Like some towns prefer colonials, some branches? I mean, off the top of my head.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. It's a really good question. If we take a town like Stanford as an example, and if we consider that, a $2 or $3 million house is still, I mean, in some cases that's even below the median. At $2-ish million, you're below the median for the town, so you're below half the house sales. If you look at another town like a Stanford and you say, okay, go below the median, I think turnkey matters in a town like Stanford, but it doesn't matter the same way that it matters in Greenwich. Again, I'm not saying that buyers don't value it. I'm not saying that. But when you have a buyer who has to look at a situation like this actually cost me money, it's different.
Yeah.
So if you're earning less money in Stanford, you might look at it like, hey, I'm getting this house for $50,000 less than I would have to pay with a new kitchen, and I would rather put the kitchen in myself. It's just like it's a different mentality, different approach. I'm not saying those people don't exist in Greenwich, but if you're wondering why something flies off the market, it's because it's easy. Yeah. It's well priced, it's easy, it looks good, it just fits in that person's lifestyle. And then, you talked about types of homes. I'm not sure if people, clearly how much you spend really changes your preferences for a particular home. However, I think most people like a lot of the same things, open layouts and, light and bright spaces and a little bit of land at least.
Yeah. Well, I ask because I've noticed, at least like driving around, I've lived here for years now. Some towns I think are more likely to have like more modern and contemporary homes. I feel like you see a lot more modern homes in a Westport, for example, than a Greenwich. Would you say that things like that, I mean, that's outside of, something you could just change on a house. But do factors like that come into play?
Yeah, actually that's a really good point as well. I think in our area, generally speaking, people are preferring a colonial.
Interesting.
I think we can see that in the data, and I think we can see it just real boots on the ground. That doesn't mean that contemporary is not going to sell, and that doesn't mean there aren't buyers for that house. There are.
Yeah.
But if we're talking about the majority of people, if you have a colonial that's in, tip-top shape, in neutral colors, in been remodeled by a designer for something that's more mainstream that everybody would like, and you're on a fair market price, you're flying off the market.
Yeah. There's just less people interested in the modern stuff, but I mean, those people are, and I'm generalizing obviously, but that's what they're looking for. Yeah. Like if you want a modern house,
you're passionate about it.
Yeah, exactly.
If you want a unique style, you're usually really passionate about it. And the cool thing about that as a seller is that you may have the only one on the market. Mm-hmm. If they really want that, and if they're willing to pay for it, you may have the only one. Wow. So that there's a trade-off.
If you like this video, YouTube thinks you'll like one of these.